my feelings for my now wife, Crystal. And I was like, oh, she's so amazing, and I just, I really want to date her, and I'm so scared. What if she doesn't like me? What does she think? And he was like, well, you got to tell her, man. You got to tell her how you feel. And I was like, no, I don't want to. No, I'm embarrassed. What if she doesn't like me? What if she? And so this conversation just goes on and on and on and on like this for hours and hours, late into the night, to the point where I'm not even sure what time it is. Finally, my buddy says, look, I'm going to camp this weekend, and if I get back on Monday and you haven't told her, I'm going to tell her. I'm like, no, you can't do that, man. No, don't do that. And he's like, be a man and tell her. And he's like, you do it right now. You hang up this phone and you call her right now and you tell her. And I'm like, fine, I'm going to. And he's like, you do that. And so he hangs up, and without even thinking, this is back before cell phones and all that sort of stuff. And so I hang up my home phone. I punch in her number. It's ringing. It goes to voicemail. And I'm like, hey, Crystal, I need to talk with you, blah, blah, blah. And then I hang up the phone. I'm like, there, I did it. Whew. Everything went fine. I'm a man. I initiated. I was clear. And then I look at the time, and it's 3:30 a.m. in the morning. I'm like, oh, no. She's going to think I'm crazy. And hence, the reason I bring up that story is we're getting into talking about dating today, the murky, confusing, exciting, frustrating world of dating. We're in a series, if you're new with us, we're calling Rethinking Romance. And if you saw this title, by the way, in the art, that's a brain going to a heart. That's not a set of lungs. I know there's been some confusion about that. But we're looking at relationships, and we're rethinking what it means to enter into a romantic relationship. From singleness to this morning, we'll be dating, and then we're going to look at marriage over the next 2 weeks. And we're all going to learn a lot, regardless of what season or life stage you're in. And if you might be thinking, wait a minute, hang on. This is church. We need to talk about heaven and hell and reaching the community. And I would say yes and amen. And we will continue talking about those things, and you'll find that they integrate into relationships very significantly. But the reason that we're focusing on relationships for these 4 weeks is because it is the building block of community. It's the building block of the church. It's the most essential and fundamental relationship, the marriage relationship in the family. Before God creates the church, before he creates the government, before he creates the schools or the community, the very first and most important relationship is between that of a husband and wife, between that of a marriage that produces a family, that produces a community, that produces a culture. And so we want to look at what this means. And in particular, this morning, I've been doing a lot of reading and talking with folks about dating. And what I'm finding is that dating, especially nowadays, has become chaotic, confusing. It is a whole different game than when I was back in it. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I'm noticing a couple of things. I'm noticing that when I'm talking with ladies, there is this kind of sort of consistent thread of like, there are no good guys out there anymore, right? Guys are either looking for a new mom or a buddy to play Xbox with, but I'm looking for a man. Where are the men in this city? And then men will often say, oh, dating is so tough. Women are unapproachable, and their standards are outrageous. And then what's interesting is when I'm talking with people about dating in particular, there's kind of this assumption in experience, like Seattle is just a hard city to meet people in. Everyone's a geek. They're always on their laptops. Nobody has any social skills. Everyone's afraid of a meaningful relationship. I mean, what does it mean to connect? And there's truth in all of those sentiments. There's this sense that the portals that we've created to connect have become shields to protect us, that we can sort of reach out without actually having to be open and honest. And it's interesting because by and large, the reason that it's important to talk about dating is because I think there's this general sense of sort of depression, of disillusionment, from the hookup culture to the cheapness of relationships, to the proliferation of pornography, to the divorce rate. There is a sort of a bitterness that comes to mind when people think about dating. And it's interesting, David Brooks, who's a columnist at the New York Times, he wrote this article several years ago, and he said this about dating. It's a long quote, but it helps set the stage for us. He said, young people hit puberty at 13, and now they do not get married until past 30. That's 2 decades of coupling and uncoupling, hooking up, relationships, shopping around. This period isn't a transition anymore. It's a spiraling life stage, and nobody knows the rules anymore. Once young people came a calling as part of courtship. Then they had dating and going steady. But now those laws have dissolved. They've been replaced with ambiguity and uncertainty. Cell phones, Facebook, Tinder, text messaging. It gives people access to hundreds and hundreds of potential romantic partners, but only increases the fluidity, drama, and anxiety of this stage. And it's interesting because when I talk to a lot of folks who are in dating relationships, instead of it being a season that motivates poetry, it seems to motivate anxiety. Dating, by virtue of getting to know someone, puts us in a vulnerable place. It can break our heart. It can frustrate us. It can be confusing. And dating, we cannot sort of monetize that heartbreak like folks like Adele and Taylor Swift can. There's a reason they make so much money, because dating can be heartbreaking. It can be confusing. And so how do we enter into this sort of relational minefield with biblical principles and a desire to honor God? And here's the reason this is important, because as much as when you talk with single folks in Seattle, like, marriage is outdated and blah, 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 and so on, 93% of millennials, my generation, want to get married. They actually want to get married. So as much as marriage gets bad press, everybody still would like to be married. Even people who say marriage is dead, they really do want to get married. And it's interesting because oftentimes I'll talk with people and they're like, yeah, no, marriage is dead. Marriage is the old ball and chain. Who wants it? But what I really need is I want someone who will accept me, who will stick with me, who will be a life partner, who won't give up on me, who will care for our kids. Yeah, that's marriage. That's what it is. That's God's good gift to us. So what's interesting is when we look at dating, we got to run it through the gambit of history, because dating is a very, very new thing in the scope of all of human history. When you look at the scriptures, when you look at most traditional cultures, it was about arranged marriage. So whether this was the parents or the matchmaker, from a very early age, you were basically paired up with somebody, and then when you came of marrying age, you got married. And here's the interesting thing. In my reading, especially in the West, arranged marriage gets really bad rap. But the interesting thing is that statistically, there was a study out of India where what happened was they were gauging the happiness of a couple. And they said that arranged marriage versus Western marriage for love. And they said arranged marriages, for the first 5 years, there was significantly lower happiness rates. But the irony and sort of the unexpected thing was that about the year 5, things flipped. And then they reported the same level of happiness. And then going on from there, the arranged marriage actually was happier than the Western marriage for love. So there's some interesting points that we can get from that. Perhaps parents and community, spiritual leaders, perhaps they can bring something to the table in regards to who we should connect with and share our life with. Now, what happens then after arranged marriage is there is courting. So this would be when a young man would come over to the parlor of the young lady's house and would meet with her family, and the family would help sort of assess the young man's character. Then what happened was the advent of additional new economies and the automobile. Then the young man would come pick up the girl, and they would go into the city to have a good time. And then as that sort of dating scene, from courtship to dating, as that grew, there became the expectation of, hey, if I'm going to spend money, then I need to get something in return. And hence we are now fully in a sort of hookup culture where we've reversed the old adage that I sang when I was a kid. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes a baby and a baby carriage. Now we flipped it, and it's usually the baby and then maybe marriage and then hopefully love out of that. So how do we approach this idea of dating, this fundamental reality of our desire for marriage? How do we understand this in a biblical way? And I want to encourage you in this. So last week we talked about singleness, and we said that singleness is not preparatory stage for marriage. It's not second best. Singleness is for devotion to God. And this morning I want to ask you this simple question. What is dating? What is dating for? It seems like a pretty straightforward question, but sometimes it's kind of hard to get a straight answer. And I just want to give you one and then break it down. My argument from the scriptures is that dating, whether it's courtship or whatever you want to call it, it's that process between being single and being married, that stage of coupling. And I would say dating is for evaluation. The purpose of dating is to evaluate, will this person, are we compatible? Will we work for a lifetime? Do they have the character to be faithful, committed to the Lord for the long haul? And so, here's where we're going to go. I just want to give you 3 simple things this morning. When to date. When to date. Timing. Who to date. That's the process of evaluating. And then how to date. That's the process of doing this strange thing that we call dating. So the first, when to date. When should you start dating? That's a question that I hear especially from 15, 16-year-olds all the time. Hey, is it time to start dating? And here's what I would tell you. I would say it is time to start dating when you are ready to get married. It is time to start dating when you are ready to get married. If the purpose of dating is evaluation for marriage, then the purpose is not just to hang out or to make out. The purpose is to evaluate, is this person a good spouse, a good fit for me? So what I would encourage us is, in a world where dating has become a season and a life stage, as God's people, we should be about the goodness of marriage and getting married. And the purpose of dating is to get married. That's the end goal, the teleos, the design, the purpose, where we're moving in that process. And so I love the way that Jeff Behe says it. He says, dating without the intent of getting married is like going to the grocery store with no money. You either leave unsatisfied or you take something that isn't yours. Dating should be the process of evaluation to get married. And then some people will say, okay, so if dating is about getting married, then my question just jumps forward one more. How do I know when I should get married? How do I know when I'm ready for marriage? And the reason this is so important to talk about is that our culture has all sorts of ridiculous ideas about this, ridiculous answers. One will say, well, here's how you know when you're ready to get married. You meet someone and you just have that once-in-a-lifetime feeling, right? Just that spark, that zing, that bow, right? And there's a kids' animated movie called Hotel Transylvania, and they talk about the spark, and that's how you know you're to meet the one who you're absolutely going to fall in love with. And guys, what I'd encourage you to think about is that's attraction. That's just attraction. And here's the truth. If you're a Christian brother or sister this morning, when you're running after Jesus, what you're going to find is in your workplace and in your school and in your community, you are going to meet very attractive people. They're going to come across your path, right? So you need to have more criteria than attractive, because if you're running this way, an attractive person is running that way, and you're like, oh, that person's attractive, I got the spark. Turns out you're going to start running in another direction. We got to have more criteria for evaluation than attraction. And the purpose of dating is evaluation. Here's what I'll tell you, just straight up. Most of us trying to figure out if this person you're physically attracted to is not going to be the issue. That thing comes naturally, right? We get if we have that spark, if we have that desire. Some people will say, well, how should it, when am I ready to get married? Some people will say, well, you just know when you know. And that is completely unhelpful and doesn't make any sense. Some people will say, and this is a big one. This is a big one. You see this in romantic comedies. How should I know when I get married? That you have no doubts at all. At all, right? This is really bad writing. You can just imagine some guy in a Starbucks, in Hollywood, like, this is a great script. But like in every romantic comedy, if the guy that she's initially interested does anything wrong, right? You're like, oh, he's no good for you, girl. You got to get out of there. What are you thinking? He's a terrible, terrible person, right? And so there's this sense of like, you should have no doubts at all. Everything should be perfect. It's what Tim and Kathy Keller call apocalyptic romance. And essentially, it's kind of a false gospel in our culture where it's like, you meet that person and you experience romantic salvation, right? The skies turn red. Your heart explodes in fireworks. They fill you up with all the meaning you could ever want. No, no, no. Marriage is a blessing. Marriage is a gift. It is a wonderful gift to find a spouse and to share your life together. But it is a gift far under salvation. And oftentimes we make it a god. We make it an idol in our culture. So how do you know if you're ready to get married? Let me give you a couple things. Is your life in order? Is your life in order? Not that you've made it, not that you're fully mature, not that you've figured everything out, but your life is organized enough that you can invite someone else into your crazy. Right? So this means emotionally, are you a grown-up? Have you dealt with your issues? Have you dealt with your addictions? Before you start a relationship that you're going to bring baggage in carry-ons, are you addressing those deep heart issues with God so that you can invite someone in to share a relationship with you? Are you mature financially? Do you have significant amounts of debt? If you do, it might not be time to get married yet. You might need to figure yourself out before you invite someone else to share life with you. Because the truth is, neither a man nor a woman wants to come in and be your dad or be your mom, right? You're looking for a partner, someone to share life with, someone who's running at your same speed. We'll get to that. But are you mature financially? I remember, when I was engaged to Crystal, or actually rather beforehand, I knew I was supposed to talk with her dad and ask for her hand, right? And but I didn't know what that looks like or how that works exactly. And so I chose a day when her and her sisters were out going camping or something. And I called her dad and said, hey, I'd like to get together with you and talk about something, you know? And so I was so nervous, and I had no idea how this works. And so I remember I wore a tie, which was really weird. I did not wear ties. And then I borrowed my buddy's really professional briefcase, and I put all of my financial information, wrote up a life plan and everything, and I go over there, and I'm shaking, and now I understand why he was laughing. I cannot wait for this time with my girls. But so I go over there, and I'm so nervous, and I'm trying to unbutton the briefcase, why isn't this opening? And they're just chuckling and kind of playing with me, totally messing with me in retrospect. But anyways, one of the big things that I was trying to explain to them, because I thought this is how it works, is I'm here's where I'm at financially, and this is how much I make, and these are my plans, and this is my investment. And they were laughing at the whole thing. But the point of that is, and I'm not I had much to learn and still do. But the point is, are you at a place where you are maturing financially, where you can take care of yourself, where you can take care of a family, where you can invite someone in to enjoy life with you? Because the truth is, when you are married, your expenses double. And so it's good to have a plan. And here's what I'm not saying. It's figure that out in community with wisdom. You know, a lot of people, there's this sense of I've got to have this big fat house before I can get married and all this sort of stuff. No, not necessarily. Just a plan. Just a plan and some maturity. The next thing, are you mature relationally? Here's the big piece. If you want to get married, you can practice right now with your roommates. You can grow in selflessness. You can grow in self-awareness. Are you faithful? Do you keep your commitments? Do you keep your word? Your roommates and your extended family, they are practice for the future and for a spouse, right? Your selfishness, your ability to resolve conflict, it's all at play right now. You're learning right now. Are you growing in maturity? And then lastly, spiritually, are you mature spiritually? Here's a very simple question. Do you know what Christian marriage is? Do you know what Christian marriage is? Marriage is not merely marrying someone because you have that feeling in the moment. Marriage is a covenant. And we know the depths of marriage and the beauty of marriage because we understand a covenant is the way that God loves us. A covenant is a never-stopping, never-giving up, always and forever love. When we see someone at their worst, we stick around. And we love them despite their worst. I remember my wife attended a wedding with some folks. And sometimes when you've been in ministry for as long as we have, and you've done a lot of premarital counseling, and you've got to assess a lot of relationships, sometimes you can tell the ones that are really going to struggle, the ones that are going to mature quickly, the ones that will have it a little bit easier than others. And there was one particular wedding where, and not to say you can't have fun at your wedding, it can't be joyful, but I remember the bride was just giggling the entire time, not taking anything seriously, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. Till death do you part. Those are words weightier than life itself. Words to take seriously. So, are you mature spiritually? And here's why this is significant. When you begin to follow after Jesus, there are core foundational aspects of who you are that need to solidify and change. And here's what I mean. You need to know who you are, who your identity is. It's not in another person. It's in Jesus. You got to solidify that. You are loved. He died for you. He is your Lord. Because here's what happens. If you don't get that figured out, you will compromise your beliefs to appease someone else. I remember there was a young man that I was mentoring for several years. And what was interesting is that he would come to church and we would pray with one another and we were in the scriptures and we would regularly communicate. And he met this girl at work who did not love Jesus, who was not running after the things of God. And as soon as she took interest in him, he was gone. He wouldn't respond to anything. He wouldn't reply to anything. There was so much insecurity in his heart and uncertainty of who loved him that when he got this just little bit of female attention, he was willing to throw his God in the garbage to chase after his actual God. And here's what I would tell you. There will be a struggle with this. And the reason that this is so significant and so important is that if you put the godlike weight of your identity and value in someone else, you will crush them and destroy the relationship. It wasn't meant to hold that level of weight. So you have to know who you are. You have to know that you are loved. Your value first, primarily, foundationally, comes from Jesus Christ. You were made in the image of God. You were made for him. And if you find your significance and your value and the approval and applause of your spouse, you will never be able to tell them a hard truth that they need to hear. You will have a relationship that is bent and crooked and unhealthy. And then finally, you got to know your mission. This is what it means to be spiritually mature. Your significance doesn't come from your relationship status. It comes from the mission that God has called us to. God has given you his Holy Spirit. He's given you spiritual gifts. He said, go and make disciples of every nation. That is primary. Your relationship status is secondary. Great blessing, wonderful. If you find someone that can partner with you in accomplishing God's mission, praise God. But here's the truth. Your mission, your significance is all bound up in Jesus Christ. And when you figure that out, when you're mature in that, when you're solid in that, when you know who you are, you're ready to get married. You're ready to invite someone else in. But when you're not, what you will be doing is you'll be getting from them things that you need to get from God himself. So, okay, that's when to date. How about who to date? This is the big significant thing. If dating is the process of evaluation, what should you be looking for in the person you may spend the rest of your life with? Now, here's the big surprise, all right? If you've been with us, we usually go right through books of the Bible. You're like, Kyle, chapter and verse, where is this? I haven't seen anything yet. Here's what I would tell you. Get ready for this, okay? Dating is not in the Bible. Bum, 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 right? There's no like Exodus, 16, Moses took Zipporah to Chili's and they, ordered the French fries. Like, it's not in there, right? So what do we do then? How do we understand the scriptures? What does it mean to enter into this confusing stage of life biblically in a way that honors God? Here's what I would tell you. The Bible doesn't talk about how we date there's some components in there, but it has a lot of information about who we should date, a lot of principles about character. Let me give you an example. Proverbs 25:24 says, "It is better to live in a corner of the roof than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife." So guys, here's a very simple, and you might think, well, that's for a husband. No, okay, he's already up on the roof. It's too late for him, okay? What you should hear is if there's a girl, oh, but she's so hot and she's into me. Okay. Does she love the Lord? Is she always picking for a fight? Is she maturing in her faith? Just because she's into you doesn't mean you have to be into her. You need to evaluate according to the scriptures. Proverbs 25:24. It's better to live in the corner of a roof than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife. How about this? Proverbs 25:28. A man without self-control is like a city broken down to and left without walls. Ladies, yes, he's handsome. Yes, he's interesting. Yes, he's funny. Yes, he's interested in you. Yes, it feels good to be admired. But if he is short-tempered, if he lacks self-control, if he has no plan in life, he's like a city without walls. Whatever happens will just take him over. He'll go with the wind. That is not marriage material. And oftentimes we tend to think, but I'm in love. I'm in love. I love this person. Here's what I would tell you. This is what we got to be careful of, why dating matters. You're evaluating that person to find out if you should marry them. Oftentimes what we say when we say we're in love is, I'm a narcissist and I like the way you make me feel. We got to be very careful This stuff matters. We tend to focus on physical characteristics rather than internal character. So we pick and choose different features that we want. We make a little list, right? Like a Subway sandwich. Here's what I want. I want him to have shiny green eyes, and I want him to have flowing red hair, and I want him to write poetry, and he's got to be sensitive, but not too sensitive, right? And he's got to be rich, but not too rich, but rich enough to buy me what I want. And he's got to be muscular, but not too muscular, just a little definition, right? And we got like this huge, crazy list. Most of the stuff doesn't even matter at all. It was funny. I remember I was talking with this gal who was single at the time, and I was sitting down with her. I asked her for permission to use this story. And I remember asking her, so what is it that you're looking for in a guy? What's kind of like on your list? And she basically said something similar to what I was just joking about. She's like, here's what I want. She's like, I want just this super like musical, poetic, artsy guy, right? He's got to have long hair. He's got to cry a lot, be really in touch with his feelings. And he needs to love the Lord and be able to take care of me and, have a plan for life. And the irony of this is that many, many, many years later, she ends up marrying a guy that is the polar opposite of every external feature on her list. He's not sensitive in the ways that she was hoping. He's not musically oriented in the way she was hoping. But here's the truth. He does love the Lord. He does provide for her. He does care for her. And the things that she wanted character-wise were the things that he has in spades. And so the truth is, a lot of times when we think about the list, we're prioritizing things that just do not matter, and we think that we know what we want. We don't know what we want, and we certainly oftentimes do not know what we need. And so I was asking her if I could tell the story. She said yes, and she said her big takeaway that she would encourage for singles is instead of building a list of all the things you want, build a list of all the things you want to be. You want to become. You want to be like. Because you're welcoming someone into your life. And it's interesting because we really don't know what we want. Many of you may be already aware of this, but Match.com, one of those dating websites, they used to have the way that they processed and connected people was very kind of bound up in like, what kind of eye color and hair color and all this sort of stuff. And they realized that a lot of their matching wasn't working out. People go on one date and that was it. And so what they had to do is they brought in experts and they fundamentally retooled their program because what they realized was that they were connecting people based on things that they thought people wanted that were all external, all surfacey, and the hard data statistics were when that people actually met someone that kind of fit most of the features on their list, their character issues were way off and there wasn't a connection. In fact, many people have had this experience. I remember I was in high school. And there was that girl, right? The girl, the head cheerleader, the girl that all the other guys are into, and it's, her. And I remember I got to sit next to her on the bus as we were going on a field trip. And I was like, whoa. And we start talking. And I had that experience that many of you have had where you realize that beauty is only skin deep. And that true attraction is being attracted to someone's character. And it was interesting because she was far more beautiful than every other girl on the bus, but as we started talking, my attraction to her grew less and less and less because there was no character, there was no depth. And so we got to be careful that we don't put things on our list that need not be there. It's interesting because when you think about how people date these days, Tinder is the most popular dating app by far. And when you go onto Tinder, what essentially you're looking for is two things. You're looking for looks, are they hot? And charm, are they funny? Does it grab me? And then I will swipe right. And what's interesting then is now dating typically happens. You go into a loud bar. You can't really talk to each other or get to know the person. So then the question is, are they hot? And are they funny enough that I'm kind of into them? And what we got to be very careful about is that if Proverbs 31 says this, it's an appropriate warning. Charm is deceitful and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Oftentimes we look for particular features when features change over time. And I was going to do this thing. It would have been hilarious, but it is kind of mean. You can Google celebrities that have aged horribly. I was showing this to my wife, and I'm like, this is so funny. We got to have this person or that person. She's like, don't do that. That's so mean. That's so mean. But the point that would have come through really clearly is you don't want to marry someone merely based on their physical features, because physical features will and do change. We've been in ministry long enough to know people who've gotten in horrible accidents, who've been diagnosed with cancer, who've had pretty significant radical changes to their physical appearance. And so you want to love the person for who they are. Yes, you should be attracted to them, but recognize that those things will change. A woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Here's a really powerful story I was reading. It was the Vietnam War. There were two buddies. They were both engaged to these gals and hoping to get back after the war and get married. And what happened was there was a phosphorus grenade. So those of you who know it basically burns your skin, your flesh, horribly, horribly. They were hit by a phosphorus grenade, and they were both, their faces and their bodies were horribly wounded and burnt. So the story goes that they were in a hospital, and the first one was waiting for his fiancée to get there. When she got there, she saw him for the first time in a long time, and his face was horribly mangled. He looked nothing like she remembered. And she was so brokenhearted and so deeply disturbed by his appearance that she took off her engagement band and she put it by his bed and said, I can't. And she left crying, and he was crushed and broken. And then a few days later, his buddy was sitting there. He was scared and nervous because his fiancée was coming in. And his buddy had just been so destroyed and so depressed and so crushed. And his fiancée came in, and she looked at him, and his face now horribly mangled and droopy, and she kind of positioned herself, and she kissed him on his lip, and she said, that'll do. That'll work. It's a powerful story of how we are to love someone's character and who they are. And yes, you should be attracted to them, but it is so, beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. We got to be really careful that we don't become consumers of other people, trying to create someone like a Subway sandwich that's kind of an assembly of parts, because here's the truth. When you meet someone and when you begin to mature in relationship, you realize there is no perfect person. There is no one. Everyone has flaws and failures and insecurities and shortcomings. And so you want to marry a person who has character and who's going to grow in, because here's the truth. I tell this to people all the time. I say when you get married, you're actually marrying three people. You're marrying the person you think they are, you're marrying the person they actually are, and you're marrying the person they become. And so what does that mean? That shouldn't be confusing to you. What it should do is be helpful in your evaluation. Is this person a man or woman of character? Do they have integrity? Do they keep their word? Do they love the Lord? Those are the big questions that are going to shape the trajectory of that person's life. That's the stuff you should care about. Yes, their eye color, their hair color, their muscularity, sure, whatever. But those things will ebb and flow. What matters is the character of the person. So, here's a couple of quick things to evaluate. First, are they a believer in Jesus Christ? Are they a Christian? That should be number one on your list. The scriptures in 2 Corinthians 6:14 say, do not be unequally yoked. That's a really weird term. We start thinking about eggs and stuff. What the heck does that mean? But it's an agricultural term that you would yoke two oxen together. And if you had one really big one and one really small one, it wouldn't quite work. If you had one that was going one direction and one going the other, it doesn't work. So it's a really fitting illustration. You want to marry someone that agrees with you at the deepest possible level. And too often, people do missionary dating, evangel dating, where it's like, I can change them. They've got so much raw potential. And here's what I would tell you. Number one on your list, you're not looking for looks. You're not even looking for potential. You're running hard after Jesus, and lots of very attractive people will come by your way. But if they're running the other direction, don't stop for a moment. Keep going. And as you run after Jesus and you look to your left and your right, if you find some attractive people that are keeping pace with you, those are the people to start talking with. Those are the people to get interested in. And the reason this is super important, guys, is because I know, I'll just warn the ladies. I know a lot of guys that are, when they find out that a girl's a Christian, they're really good at dialing up the religious language. Oh, thus saith the Lord, let me get my Bible, and blah, 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 and so on and so forth, right? And she'll be like, but he's a Christian. He'll come to church with me. He doesn't love the Lord at all, right? There's a great country wisdom. It says you can put a bow tie on a turd, but it's still a turd, right? So ladies, Psalm 1, here's a great criteria. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the way of the wicked, nor sit in the seat with scoffers. His delight is in the law of the Lord. On his law he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree planted beside streams of living water. In all he does, he prospers. That's a man you're looking for. You're looking for a man who loves the Lord. And you might say, well, how do I know if he loves the Lord? Here's what I would tell you. People are like tea bags. You know what they really are when you put them in hot water. You want to see that person go through suffering, heartache, disappointment, stress, and failure. And then you know their real character. Because the truth is, anybody can get dressed up nice to go on a date. Anyone can put on their best self, but what you want to know is you want to know the worst self. You want to know who this person is through and through. Galatians 5, do you see the fruit of the Spirit in their life? Number 2, are you running at the same pace? I already kind of talked about this, but the truth is, it's not enough even just for them to be a Christian and kind of sign on the dotted line, sure, I go to church or whatever. Are they running at the same pace as you? Because I see this oftentimes. A woman will link arms with a guy who says he's a Christian. She'll be prayerful. She'll be in the Word. She'll be participating in church. And the guy will show up, take it or leave it, doesn't really care. You want someone that's going at the same pace because they'll either double your efficiency or cut it in half. And you're looking for someone that is going to push you, that's going to play the game harder than you. You're looking for a partner, not someone with potential. You're looking for someone who's going to make you the best you can be, who's going to make you play your best game. I remember when I met Crystal, we have kind of a different kind of story. When I first met her, I hated her guts. we were those people that like hate each other but secretly love each other type of thing. We had that kind of dynamic going. I thought she was beautiful, but I did not like her, and we disagreed on a variety of things. But the one thing that I continued to grow in attraction was she knew her stuff. And she could go toe-to-toe with me. I remember one time we got in this big argument with our friends. Her and a girlfriend went out in the parking lot. She took off her shoe and threw it into the forest. She was so mad at me. I'm like, I like that girl. I like that girl. We got something going on here. So here's the next part. Are you theologically compatible? All right? Many of you will say, yeah, okay, that person's a Christian. Good to go. We're good to go. Here's what I would tell you. It matters how you view theology. So I'll just give you what's called the theological triage, right? If you can go ahead and bring up the pyramid. So there are issues of absolutely essential nature. Is Jesus king of your life? Did he raise from death? Is he the boss? Not that you just grew up in a Christian family and you would identify yourself as Christian, but he actually has authority in your life. And then there's other things too. I would say things that are important. What do you believe about baptism and church and things of that nature? And then there's other things that can even be disagreements on, right? Like there's whole scenario of gospel freedom. So as you're thinking about, are you theologically linked up? Is there compatibility there? I'd encourage you to bring in your community and discuss these things. Next, are you socially compatible? Are you socially compatible? There's a famous saying in like marriage circles and counseling and stuff. They say opposites attract and then attack. And when I'm saying are you socially compatible, I don't mean are you identical. But I mean, let me give you an example. I've been reading a lot about Jonathan Edwards. He's a famous theologian. And he married, his wife's name was Sarah. And what was interesting is how different they were. Sarah was super social, super outgoing, super extroverted, and wanted to throw parties and stuff. And Jonathan Edwards was a theologian, right? Socially awkward, loved to be alone, loved to study and stuff. And yet what was interesting is that their differences complemented one another. And here's the truth. You will typically be attracted to someone who's very different than you. And the question is, will you see that difference as something God put in place to draw you out and make you better? Or will it be an obnoxious annoyance that will drive you nuts? What I would encourage you to see is your differences God ordains, God arranges to make you better, to make you more like Jesus. And then finally and lastly, are you physically attracted to them? When you're dating someone, you want to be attracted to them. That is important, right? That should go without saying. So finally then, let's talk about how to date. So we thought about when to date, we thought about who to date. Let's talk about how exactly. First thing I would tell you is that when you enter into a dating season, do so not just because you feel like it, not just because it's the thing to do, not because you just met someone randomly, but do so with prayer. Do so with a confidence in God. And when you do that, it will take the desperation out of dating. Because you know He's in charge, and you know He loves you. And you know He's got good things in store for you. God loves you and is going to take care of you regardless of your relationship status. Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 7, many of you know this. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, including your dating, acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. Allow God to be the boss in your dating life. And I tell you this, many of you are like, we got to reach the country, we got to talk about heaven and hell and salvation. And I say, yes, absolutely. But eternal life begins now. And Jesus says, go and make disciples, baptizing them, teaching them everything I commanded you. And that means your spiritual life ties in with your romantic life. Invite God into that process. Let Him lead you. Date with prayer, date with clarity. Here's a huge thing I see as a pastor, is that dating is confusing and murky enough without adding to the chaos. So guys, I'll give you a very specific instruction. Initiate with clarity, all right? If you're interested in someone, don't go up to her and be like, hey, you want to hang out? You want to get coffee sometime, right? And then you guys go out, and afterwards you're like, we went on a date. And she was like, we're just hanging out. Wait, weren't we? What was that? Like, where are we? What does this mean? Initiate with clarity. Be open and honest. And here's the thing. I knew a guy who literally, when he was in his dating season, he made slides and did the slideshow, which is a little bit overkill, all right? But on a spectrum from total ambiguity to intensity, go for clarity. Just be honest about how you feel about that person, that you would like to get to know them better. And if you're here and you're like, oh, the guy initiates with clarity, calm down, it's okay. Ruth initiates with Boaz. Ladies can initiate too. But here's the thing. Women, by and large, at least in my conversation, still want the man to initiate. It says a lot about his character if he's willing to do that. And what I would say is that we live in a time where, unfortunately, we have not equipped or trained men to do this well. So in a past generation, it was interesting because you would have all sorts of dances and community events. And this is even still the case over in Europe and other places in the world, where a man would ask a woman to one of these events. And so they would do this repeatedly. You do this multiple times a year, and you could go up and initiate, and you could have a little boldness, and you wouldn't feel a total sense of rejection. Now with technology, we are creating a generation of men who are cowardly, who are just straight up cowardly. And here's what I would tell you guys. Be a man. Tell her if you're interested in her. Invite her out. Initiate with clarity. That's what she wants anyways. And here's what I would say for the women as well. I think that there's a very important aspect of clarity that you need to bring to the table. If you're not interested in the guy, it's okay to tell him that. There are women that are way too nice, and they just string guys along, or they just ghost them and don't say anything at all. There is a great story a pastor friend of mine tells, where he talks about a guy. He does youth or campus ministry, so he's in the dating scene a lot. And one of his guys approached a lady in their ministry and said, like, hey, I'd like to take you out for dinner. And it's kind of unclear, so she asks, is this a date? And he said, yeah. And she'd say, I'd rather not. I think you're a great guy, and we'd have a wonderful time, but I'm not interested in you in that way. And some of us would go, ooh, oh, burn, oh, that's tough. But what was interesting is that my pastor friend was saying that the guy actually loved it. He's like, I don't have to worry. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to stay up late at night going, what does she mean by that? What does it mean? Will I ever know? Just clarity. Clarity, as Pastor Nate often tells me, clarity is kindness. Just be open and honest about how you feel. Be clear. And then the other thing I would say is date with purity. Date with purity. Oftentimes I'll get the question, how far is too far? And I would flip it and say, the question isn't what you can get away with, but rather, how holy can you be? And here's what I mean by it. If the purpose of dating is evaluation, then you want to be as clear-headed and objective as possible. And you've already got a lot going against you, statistically, scientifically, measurably. there's this thing called attraction, and in particular, it's called infatuation. It lasts for about 12 to 16 months, and it means that you don't think clearly. You only see the positive. And so what I would encourage you to is that if you bring in, and I got to say this real quick, the world says you have to have sex with someone before you get married because you got to see if you're sexually compatible. And here's what I would tell you. Sex is important and it's a gift from God. But there is things that are far more important compatibility-wise because especially if you've never been married, when you're married, you're not having sex all the time. You are friends with someone. I'm sorry for the frank way of this, and I know that some of you are going to have conversations with your kids, but it's important to hear this from the pulpit. They're going to hear it from the TV. They're going to hear it from the internet. Please give me a little grace. What I would tell you is that you want to assess people for their character, not just their physicality. When you bring physicality into it, you actually become less clear and less objective. And I know people who have carried on relationships with someone they knew was bad for them because they jumped the gun and they made it, they entered into a sexual relationship early. So Proverbs says, can a man carry fire next to his chest and not get burned? It's a very simple proverb, and the reason I present it to you is that if you're asking how far is too far, what I would tell you is that your body and your physicality are given to you as gifts from God to be physically intimate. And when you're asking how far is too far, you've been engineered in such a way that you want to follow through. So it's not about how far is too far, but when is the right time. And the right time is in marriage. I'll say it like this. You don't get on an airplane headed to Hawaii thinking that you're going to get off halfway, thinking that there's some kind of layover or rest stop. There's not. You go to Hawaii, all right? The Song of Solomon says, do not awaken love before it's time. And here's what I would tell you. If you're a younger Christian brother or sister here today and you're thinking about dating and you really want to move forward and you want to be intimate, the thing that me and my wife often say is sex is good enough to wait for and it's not good enough not to wait for. It's a wonderful gift in the confines and in the protection of marriage. I'll say it like this. Before you marry someone, they are not your spouse, and they could potentially be someone else's spouse. Would you want someone fooling around with your future wife or husband? The scripture says it this way. We have basically two relationships. We're either brother or sister, or we're husband and wife. There's no friends with benefits category. And you might think that's repressive, that's old-fashioned, and that's harmful. And I would tell you that that is God's design, and it is good. As a pastor, I counsel some of the deepest pain comes from people's sexual lives. I'm not telling you this to be repressive or cruel or mean. I love you, and I love our church. And I want to be a counterculture witness to a world that is decaying and dying. And one of the best ways we can do that is to have a high view of sex, not a low view. It is a wonderful blessing and gift from God that should be in marriage. And if it is outside of marriage, and here's what I would say. I know there's probably some of you already that have jumped the gun. And what I would tell you is there's forgiveness and grace, and there's also correction. And so if you need to talk with someone, feel free to talk with me or one of the other pastors. We want to help you. We want you to have a healthy and happy marriage for a lifetime, as God has intended. And then finally, here's what I would tell you is date with community. Date with community. We heard in the beginning the positive statistics about arranged marriage. And I would say at the very least, we should be willing to hear from those that we trust and love, who know us. Hey, is this guy good for me, or am I being crazy? Am I not being aware of some of the obvious glaring flaws? Bring in community. If the purpose of dating is evaluation, you want an objective third party to help you assess a potential marriage partner. Because the truth is sometimes we can be our own worst enemies, and we have to know that. And God has given us the great gift of being together in this church family. We love you. We want you to get married. Marriage is a great blessing, and that should be the end game of your dating. And here's what I would ask of you. Honor God. Be clear about your expectations in your boundaries. And, bring in community to help you along the way. So, all right, let me pray, and we'll continue in our worship. So, Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for the great blessing of romantic partnership and marriage. We thank you, Lord, that you designed all this. You designed our physicality. You designed our hearts. You designed our longing to couple up and to be married. And God, I pray that we would submit all of that to you as an act of worship. Lord, help us as a church family to encourage one another. Help those who are married to come along, the singles who are dating, to encourage them and counsel them and help them. Lord, I pray that we would grow together as a church, that we would be a witness to the watching world about how you intended relationships and marriage to be. Lord, and I pray in that you would gain a foothold for the gospel to proclaim your love, your grace, and your mercy to a generation yet to be born. Lord, help us, use us to reach this city. Use our marriages, use our relationships, yes, even use our dating as a witness to your glory and your goodness. And we ask this in Jesus' name. All God's people said, amen.